and welcome to the World on Fire. My name is Anna, and in this video today, we'll try to look at how did we end up in the world that looks like this. How did we end up in the world where we constantly get desensitized to mass starvations, mass shootings, and mass extinctions? I originally did shoot this video when I was on vacation in BC, but then I came home and everything looks like this.
To keep you updated with the latest on the Alberta wildfire story, now it can be said that they have the worst air quality in the entire world.
Sky is kind of orange and sun is kind of red, and I sound really bad because I've been smelling smoke for the last 2 weeks. So it only made sense to reshoot some sections of this video to showcase the collapse in action.
Is prepared to prioritize paying interest on securities over other obligations. It'll wait to send any other funding out until it can cover a full day's financial obligations. So what does that mean for you? Well, that means that Social Security checks, Medicare payments, and food stamps would all potentially stop. Now, the Council of Economic Advisors also warned that even a short default could result in the loss of 500,000 jobs.
By the end of 20th century, most of the people did see future with optimism. This is reflected in art of the end of 20th century, where we see flying cars, nuclear families, and overall futuristic and technocratic outlook on the future. Only 40 to 50 years ago, people of my age and younger did see a future with optimism, with bright hope, which cannot be said anymore about people of my generation and younger people living today, where our being is infused with a sense of collapse. But aside of optimism and futurism and technological developments, there was something else developed in 20th century. We got a philosopher's stone of economy developed during that time, GDP, or gross domestic product. GDP was introduced by Simon Kuznets, who was USSR immigrant and economist. GDP was viewed as a measure of success of particular nation. How much profit does the total nation generate? By the end of World War II, GDP was widely accepted as a measure of a well-being of a nation in general. But even Kuznets himself identified that there are a couple of issues with GDP. He strongly opposed using GDP as a sense of a well-being of individuals and people that reside within nations. GDP was claimed to be a predictable measure of nations' well-being, of individual incomes, as well as unemployment rate in the past. But after 2008 crisis, those correlations were largely dismissed. Remember 2008 crisis? That was like 3 crises ago. GDP doesn't tell you who makes the money or how the money is distributed. It doesn't have any correlation with the state of environment within any given region. It excludes a lot of non-human animals and neighboring nations. And of course, GDP also excludes any idea if you are, at least sometimes, happy with your life. And you see, the thing is, it is not a problem of GDP in particular, it is a problem of how we run our economies and governments. GDP is a metric, it is a dry number. What we do with it is completely up to us. If for some reason we decide that consumption of ice cream per capita is the desired metric of human well-being, and then try to maximize consumption of ice cream, then you better not be lactose intolerant. Modern economists like Diane Cole, for example, noted that current GDP metric is actually fitted for war times. GDP shows how well is the country prepared for war. Or, may I add, for colonial or imperialist expansion. She is, by the way, still a very pro-capitalist economist, even though she compares GDP to wartime economy. And so, of course, when we treat GDP as a central metric and for some reason we don't achieve our target growth, we can do some things. One fairly easy thing that you can do to increase GDP is to commodify something that is not yet commodified. For example, your relationship. Countries can also start selling things which are not yet sold, extracting resources which are not yet extracted, cutting trees which are not yet cut. Our current system of economy, of course, facilitates our endless consumption, but more than that, it also facilitates the endless commodification of our own existence. somehow, despite all of the precautions of pro-capitalist economists and all of the critiques of anti-capitalist ones, we still ended up in a world where we constantly think that it is okay to dispense our environment and to commodify everything from our birth to death. And I mean, is it really surprising that we ended where we ended? I don't think so. If you would teleport yourself to 40 to 50 years ago and will start to explaining the basic neoliberal principles of deregulating economy, you would be looked at as if you were completely going off the rails. After all, invisible hand of a free market is grabbing single mothers and tossing them into poverty. So who in their right mind would, rely on invisible hand of a market to figure the society? Well, who if not us? Basic principles of neoliberal economy were laid by Chicago School of Economics. Stigler and Friedman were not that much of an exceptional economist as much as they proposed solution to the capitalist stagnation of the 70s when the economy was running out of the steam after Second World War. And principles of neoliberal economics were really good in transporting wealth back to the top 1% after US went on its socialist spree in 60s and 70s with all the social and civil movements. By the way, the introduction of neoliberal economics and Chicago School's thought into the mainstream media and mainstream economics is sometimes viewed as a counter-revolution to the social movements of the 20th century. And I'm on vacation over here. I've been spreading anarchy over my sister's apartment. Look at this nice textures and things that you can have when you don't have 3 cats which are actively trying to destroy your apartment. And I've been spending plenty of my time reading Rosa Luxemburg's writings, and it is very frustrating to see that the things that we experience right now were predicted by economists and thinkers over 100 years ago. It is, of course, also frustrating to see that the climate collapse and climate crisis was predicted over 200 years ago, then was again re-predicted by oil corporations over 100 years ago, and we still just decided to do nothing about it. We know that dumping chemicals into atmosphere and water is harmful, yet we do it anyway. We know that rising social inequality and wealth disparity does create social unrest and harm to lower wage workers, yet we do it anyway. We know that hard-right anti-trans and anti-immigrant narrative will lead us to more authoritarian forms of the government, yet we choose it anyway. And of course, I perfectly understand frustration of people of younger generations and those younger than me. Zoomers are a first generation that was raised with no promise of a better future or no promise of American dream. Instead, they were raised with a promise of a collapse. Of course, millennials faced collapse too, but we more so had to find it ourselves rather than being promised collapse from the very start. We can also experience break between Zoomer and millennial memes online on the internet, where millennial memes are more depressing, more nihilistic, and Zoomer memes are already post-ironic, very abstract and absurdist. But I'm sorry for this detour, let's return to our scheduled collapse content. And the biggest question that I had for the last 5 years or so, and which I guess resulted in this channel, which I treat as a mix of leftist propaganda and personal therapy, is this: is the world actually okay? When I was a young larva of political radical, I had a particular interest in the role of an individual human under authoritarian government. When everybody had their romantic phase, I was going through my USSR prison tattoo phase. And of course, by the time I did hit about 25, far-right movements started to come up in mainstream media as well as in mainstream politics. This, of course, was and is very concerning for me because I know what is the potential progression of this mood. United States went sharp up in its anti-immigrant laws, and now, of course, we end up having active white nationalists marching around Washington. We have a bunch of anti-trans and anti-women's laws introduced within the United States, but the same issue persists worldwide. This is not a good progression. It's not good at all. About a year ago, 3 Arrows did post a video on YouTube which is called Americans Coming Weimar Moment, and Dan knows what's coming, and so do I. But far-right movements that we see right now are not actually by any means a cause of collapse. Rather, they are a symptom. Authoritarian and far-right momentum gains traction at a time of despair. Any pre-existing far-right movements in history were a coping mechanism, a desire to conglomerate and to transfer all societal issues on a small group of people, desire to eradicate social decay and instability by the means of eradicating people. Very different far-right movements nonetheless have one thing in common, where they are trying to restore social order out of despair and chaos of collapse. And today is no different than the past. While we can view Trump or Brexit or war in Ukraine as horrible things in themselves, they are also a sign of a rise of authoritarianism, rise of hard right momentum, rise of the issues in the world that is clearly not okay. Historically, both pro-capitalist and anti-capitalist economists did see some issues with capitalism. Anti-capitalist economists like Marx, but also modern-day Wolf and my vacation friend Rosa Luxemburg did identify several issues with the capitalism. All issues of capitalism are also accepted by pro-capitalist economists, except the only difference is that they do say that somehow the system that is collapsing on itself is acceptable and good. For one, capitalism does really commodify things which are not yet commodified. Everything for what you're not paying money right now, you will be paying for in 5 years. Second problem is that capitalism is driven only by desire to make profit. Objective goal of capitalism is to produce goods and services, but subjective goal of capitalism is only to produce profits. And third issue is that the capitalism as a system only exists as far as there is a surplus that can be extracted from workers. As a consequence, there is always a drive to increase efficiency and productivity of the capitalist system, but also there is a drive to minimize the pay to workers for producing more. Everything outside of the capitalist system will progressively get absorbed into the capitalist system and then destroyed. And I'm not just talking about glaciers or species over here, I'm also talking about our actual livelihoods. And any far-right movement members also feel this absorption by capitalism in their bones, though they do come to a very different conclusion to why they can't raise the family, support their children, or have a stable job. Again, as any capitalist critics as well as capitalist economists did observe, capitalism is very prone to collapse and it is not able to handle external crises at all. Any external crisis does result to damage to the economy, losses to the regular workers, and also gains to the top 1%. And visible hand of a free market will not sell us degrowth economy. It will not sell us sustainable future or large systematic changes to existing economic systems. Paying acceptable wages or building sustainable future is simply not profitable. But nuclear winter and scorched planet do create scarcity and need, and therefore are perfectly profitable. Instead, what capitalist system can do for us is create scarcity of clean water or clean air and other resources, and then sell us these newly scarce goods. Free market suffocates people in equatorial regions in wet bulbs, while it sells lithium-infused batteries and AC units in the global north. But hey, GDP is growing. Quite literally, Canada is selling clean air to be sent outside, and these exports do contribute to Canadian GDP. Of course, this is a tiny percent, but this is a forward-looking business model. And I have some bad news for you, but since you clicked on the video that has world despair in the title, and you were still watching me standing in a cloud of smoke, I guess you're getting what you came for. Capitalism is not going anywhere anytime soon. Yes, you can say that capitalism is the main and the only mode of production that we have in the world right now, but it still continues to expand. You can say that Africa was colonized, but you can also say that it was not colonized yet. Capitalism and neoliberal economies didn't yet settle in the East and Africa and South America. And if you think that capitalism is declining in the West and you're safe in the comfort of your Western home, then you're wrong too, because decline to neoliberal capitalism means very little to decline of capitalism as a whole. I spent a good 100 pages on this video reading about collapse of capitalism, and after reading all those 100 pages, I can say that barely any of that information mattered. because ideas of collapse of capitalism largely are rooted in 18th century understanding of capitalism. This is a view that predated our modern understanding of capitalism, that a system that is continuously changing and mutating. We now have very little excuse to say that capitalism is going to fall on itself. Sorry to all the accelerationists and Zizek fans out here. There is not going to be a point where a capitalist system simply falls. And by extension, there is no excuse to sit in your ass and wait for the playfield to clear. We currently stand on the edge of AI and automation revolution, which would be beneficial to us had we not been under the capitalist mode of production. But in our current society and current state of economy, AI and automation simply means that we will face really harsh layoffs and really harsh decline in income. We will see a rise of knowledge-based and data-driven capitalism in the West, while Washington consensus is continuing colonization of Global South. Future will be shaped by low-paying, unstable freelance jobs. It will be shaped by workers who are promised freedom, but in reality are stripped from their employment rights, social security, and community support. Future will be shaped by the people who will work more than ever for less than ever. It will be shaped by those who start working way before finishing school and yet will never retire. Future will be shaped by the workers who are living in society which is gaining authoritarian momentum. We will shape the world where individual freedom and securities ought to be sacrificed for the strength of a capital, of a nation, but also for well-being of a top 1% who will continue to generate profit no matter how bad it gets for a regular worker. All this to be staged on a planet with dying ecosystems where biodiversity is viewed as a commodity to be bought and sold rather than a base of our livelihood. In a world of dying ecosystems and wage slavery, authoritarian momentum as well as capitalism will prevail because they are, like some sort of twins separated at birth, able to profit off collapse. And if for some reason you think that voting really hard or waiting for acceleration to take the toll is going to solve our problems, then you're wrong. US will spend $245 billion on bailing out banks in 2023 alone. This will be enough money to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger worldwide if spent over the last decade. In the US alone, 10% of the population is living in extreme poverty. Yet, this is a choice government does. US will spend billions of dollars bailing out ultra-rich, while they discuss undermining veteran welfare and, removing any trans people's rights to exist. But hey, we have people who are so rich, they have their own billionaire space race. So I guess you can say we won capitalism. And of course, US is not alone. In the world today, governments that are yet competing with each other have one thing in common. None of the governments in the world right now are interested in distributing wealth downwards. All of them are interested in distributing wealth up. Owner class will always side with ruling class, and the ruling class will always side with owner class. None of the governments right now are interested in taking any strong action over environment or any strong action to provide support for their people. The only interest that they have is funneling money to the top. And the collapse that we're heading towards will not be a fast and cleansing experience that will set a leveled playing field for the future systems. Instead, it will be slow and painful experience that will continue till we are mindless slaves to our masters. Of course, it would be quite mean of me to leave you here in the pit of despair, hey? As I said, I've been enjoying spending some time with Rosa Luxemburg over here, though we don't agree on some things, but yet, let me tell you some. No social change ever came to be without people executing the said change. After all, human nature is what we make of it. And of course, like with many desperate situations, there is actually a way out. And the way out is through us. Not through us as individuals, but through us as groups of individuals, as communities and organizations. Today, we do not have a luxury anymore of following some strongman figure that promises us a strong nation, strong capitalism, or a strong party. Any state gets very little interest over what are the needs of their own people, especially if these needs are not aligned with needs of the government. While we stand on the edge of collapse, we also stand on the edge of opportunity. We have no liberty for inaction. A toll of capitalist system also creates an advantage for any social movement of the future. We live in a world that is extremely interconnected, both in terms of how goods and services are distributed, but also in connection between people. We already produce more food and goods and services that is needed to sustain life for all the people that already exist and even more. We also have more people, more knowledge, more experience than anybody could ever imagine 100 years ago. I truly believe that we can build a prosperous future on whatever is left to us by capitalist system, by building new on what's left from old. And I have to believe that we can, because I know what alternative looks like. Alternative is this. Alternative is annihilation. Alternative is something that I cannot accept. Thank you for coming over. If you like this video, like it. If you like this video a lot and are not yet subscribed, there is a button that allows you to see my work in the future. I'd like to see you back, and if you'd like to see me back, then you know what to do. Of course, thank you for watching, and see you on the next book.